The Dales had settled into a deceptive, damp November chill, but for Paddy Kirk, the cold was less external and more a permanent fixture in his chest. 3 months. 3 months since Beowulf, his father, had packed a battered suitcase, thrown one last furious glance over his shoulder, and driven away, supposedly to stay with an old wrestling mate, Gnasher, in Ireland. Paddy stood in the murky kitchen of the Woolpack, staring at the phone, its plastic surface suddenly heavy and accusatory. Mandy Dingle, leaning against the counter, rubbed his shoulder with a fierce, protective pressure. "You've called every one of 'em, Pat. Every wrestler, every mate, every dodgy promoter he ever worked for. Nobody's seen him since July." Mandy's voice was low, stripped of its usual brassy humor. "Gnasher sent that letter, Mandy," Paddy murmured, his gaze fixed on the crinkled envelope lying next to a half-eaten breakfast sarnie. The letter was simple, penned in Gnasher's sprawling hand. "Bear, mate, where are you? Haven't heard from you in months. Hope you're all right. The old place is still here if you need it. Let me know when you land." It was the phrase, "when you land," that was the cold, undeniable truth. Bear had never landed. Paddy felt the familiar, crushing weight of guilt. Their last conversation had been venomous, a blazing row fueled by Bear's recent terrifying mood swings, the forgetfulness, the volatility, the insomnia. Bear had accused Paddy of weakness, of being pathetic, words that still echoed in the hollow space where Paddy's father should have been. And Paddy, exhausted and hurt, had told him to go. "He said he was going, Mandy. He chose to leave. He was angry. Maybe he just decided to cut us off." "That's not our Bear, Paddy. Our Bear is a big, soft lump who cries at telly adverts and makes a fuss over Eve. He wouldn't just vanish without a word, not for this long. He's not got some grand secret, Pad. He's just missing." But Bear did have a secret, one Paddy wasn't even aware of. A tragedy unfolding just a few miles from the village, hidden by the very green, rolling landscape Emmerdale was famous for. They had gone to the police. The officer had been polite, condescendingly so. A man in his 70s, with no history of mental health diagnosis, who had voluntarily left following an argument. "He's an adult, Mr. Kirk. He's likely having a cooling-off period. Come back in 6 months if you still haven't heard." 6 months. It felt like 6 lifetimes. Chas Dingle, entering the kitchen, looked instantly at the air of suffocating dread. "Any news?" Paddy shook his head, running a hand over his tired face. "Nothing. I checked the hire car company again. The bloke who returned it was apparently scruffy. Said Bear had asked him to drop it off because his mate couldn't drive anymore." "Scruffy?" Mandy narrowed her eyes. "Did you get a name?" "No. They wouldn't release the CCTV without a proper police request, and the police won't file one. They think he's just gone off the grid." Chas Dingle poured herself a coffee, her movements slow. "Remember how withdrawn he was before he left? The irritability, the paranoia? I thought it was dementia, Paddy. I seriously did. We should have pushed him to see Liam." Paddy slammed his hand down softly on the counter. "We pushed him away, Chas. I pushed him away. He needed help, and I told him to sling his hook." Mandy pulled him into a tight hug. "Stop it. We didn't know, Pat. We only saw the anger. We didn't see what was causing it." But the true cause, the relentless brooming, the subtle entrapment, the slow dismantling of a proud man's sanity was something none of them could even fathom. Part 2. The 100 Days of Edward. Beowulf no longer existed. Only Edward remained. A dirty, ragged shell, eyes sunken with exhaustion and fear. The barn where he was kept was cold, smelling perpetually of mildew, damp hay, and unwashed bodies. It was just one of the outbuildings on Celia Daniels' isolated farm, a place of silent misery tucked away in the deep countryside, a stone's throw from where the Dales rolled into the wider world. Bear, Edward, had gone for 100 days. His decline had been swift and brutal. Confused, paranoid, and feeling utterly rejected by Paddy, he drove out aimlessly. Ray Walters, Celia's smiling, insidious accomplice, had found him sleeping in his car at a roadside lay-by. Ray, with his easy charm and offer of a clean start away from the troubles, seemed like a guardian angel. A few days of food, a clean bed, and the promise of honest work in exchange for lodgings. Bear was strong. He could work. He was grateful. The gratitude had quickly turned to obligation, and the obligation to fear. The work was brutal, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, hauling feed, repairing fences, mucking out. Ray held his ID, his phone, and his car keys for safekeeping. The clean bed was a threadbare mattress in a corner of the freezing barn, shared with other silent, defeated souls, Mick, Simo, and most recently, Anya. Anya. She was different. A young woman, not much older than Gabby Thomas, with sharp, intelligent eyes that were slowly being extinguished by the cruelty of their captors. Bear, the old wrestler, the protector, found a fierce, quiet instinct to look out for her. She was frail, frequently ill, but she carried herself with a dignity that Ray couldn't break. "You look after her, Bear," Ray had instructed, a smirk playing on his lips, calling him by his real, forgotten name, Edward, a deliberate erasure of the proud public persona. "She's sick. If she dies, it's on you, and you owe us for every cough syrup." The cough syrup never came. What did come were fevers, chills, and the slow, relentless creep of despair. Anya had confided in Bear once, her voice a ghost of a whisper. "I have a daughter, Edward, back home. She'll be looking for me." That memory, that tiny spark of a life outside the barn, had become Bear's anchor. He looked at the photo she kept hidden, a crumpled, faded picture of a girl with bright, defiant eyes, and he felt a flicker of the old Bear-wolf rage. One evening, Anya's breathing turned ragged, wet, and shallow. Bear held her hand, its skin papery and cold. He begged Ray to call a doctor, a hospital, anything. Ray's response was a cold, hard laugh. "You're lucky to be alive, Bear. Don't push it. She's got a fever. Sleep it off." The next morning, Anya was silent. Bear knew. The loss was a physical blow, worse than any pile driver he had ever taken in the ring. He roared, a guttural animal sound of pure grief that startled the other inmates, but was swiftly muffled by the distance and the thick walls of the barn. Ray ordered him to dig, a grave by the edge of Butler's farm field, near the woods. A shallow, humiliating end for a young woman with a daughter who would never know what happened. As Ray watched, Celia Daniels observing from a safe distance, Bear dug, the shovel hitting the hard, unyielding earth, each scoop a testament to his own failure. Bear wept, silent, agonized tears. He spoke Anya's daughter's name into the cold air. That moment, standing over the fresh, muddy grave, was the true nadir. Bear, the man who had faced down giants and roared to crowds of thousands, was reduced to a compliant, broken slave, digging the grave of a soul he couldn't save. Ray had systematically dismantled him, replacing his love for Paddy with misplaced loyalty and gratitude, feeding him lies that his family didn't care, that Paddy hadn't called. The secret was not just where Bear was, it was who he had become. Back in Emmerdale, the guilt was a living thing in Paddy's life. He couldn't sleep.
He saw Bear's face everywhere, in the old photos, in the empty chair, in the way Eve, his 5-year-old granddaughter, sometimes looked at him with a silent, missing question. One afternoon, Eve was playing in the garden with Mattie, pretending to be on a bear hunt, her imagination running wild. She pointed dramatically toward the distant, rolling fields near the village boundary. "Grandad Bear! Look! He's getting in that big white van!" she cried, her voice ringing with childish certainty. "It's just a van, sweetheart. You found a pretend bear, remember?" But Eve was insistent. Her lower lip wobbled. "No, it was Grandad Bear. He looked sad, and his coat was muddy, and a bad man helped him get in." Patty dismissed it, but the image, a flash of a large, hunched figure, too thin, too ragged, lodged in his mind like a shard of glass. He remembered the filthy hire car returned by the scruffy bloke. Meanwhile, a second, much more credible witness was about to stumble onto the truth. Dylan.